as we continue to see the race between Steenhuisen and Dr. Mpho Phalatse continue. Behind me, constitutional amendments are still underway here at the DA Congress at the Gallagher Convention Center. Of course, this goes beyond contestation, and the DA is looking at itself as a government and waiting. Keep in mind that they only garnered 20% of the votes in the last elections, but they are, however, bringing in new measures across various areas such as governance, land reform, education, to address some of the policy proposals they have to present themselves as a credible alternative for South Africans. I'm joined by the newly elected Mayor of Tshwane, Mr. Cilliers Brink, who's just going to elaborate further on issues of coalitions and governance. First, let's talk about your election as the Mayor of Tshwane. Do you think that this is going to be a long term for you?
Absolutely. I'm in it not just to win one fight, but to win several fights. It's important for us to succeed in Tshwane because it's the one city in Gauteng where we actually have a majority among our coalition partners. We also have a unity of purpose, which we maybe didn't have with our coalition partners in Joburg. We obviously failed. So we have to show that Tshwane works, that the coalition there can work, and that we can keep that original promise that we made to the people of Tshwane in 2021 and build a capital city that works for all of its people.
Why are political parties struggling so much with coalitions, especially in our major metros here in Gauteng? We're seeing a lot of instability. We've had a number of mayors in a few weeks, or rather a few months here in the country. How do you serve and ensure that service delivery is brought to residents on the ground if you continuously have this environment where next week I could wake up and there could be a new mayor?
So we're a very young democracy, and we have to understand we're in the phase now of the end of one-party dominance. And we don't have a democracy where one dominant party will be replaced by another dominant party. We have to use coalitions in order to fix what was broken over many years. So coalitions are inherently unstable and uncertain, but they also have a pretty tough job in places like Gauteng. For decades, these cities have been governed by one party who applied cadre deployment. So there's lots of failures to fix, but there's also a very difficult set of relationships to keep going. And I don't have to tell you how extremely difficult it is, but in Tshwane at least, I can speak for Tshwane, that we have those two essential conditions, a majority as well as a unity of purpose.
There is a brutal fight, or struggle rather, to grab positions in these various cities, and I think that also points to why some of these coalitions are so unstable. And we can also look at the DA's conduct leading up to you becoming executive mayor. In that one vote that we saw that the DA almost created a system to be able to identify its voters and voting according to a specific mandate. Where is the democracy in such a tactic, if I could call it that?
So let me just say, for the DA, it's not about positions, it's what those positions represent, in the sense of, if we have to constitute a government, if we have to deliver on the promises that we made to the electorate, we have to be in a position where we can secure all of the votes of our coalition. Remember, there's also a coalition agreement where the different parties agreed we will vote in a particular way. So a party that cannot deliver on its electoral mandate, that cannot deliver the votes needed to constitute a government, and a coalition who can't implement its own agreement is a problem. That's why internal party democracy and having party discipline, having a measure of coherence and making sure we can keep our promises, those aren't things at cross purposes. There's a time for internal debate, there's a time for negotiations between coalition partners, but when we've reached a decision, if we've made an agreement, then we have to have the ability to enforce that.
Okay, let's move to your governance policy proposals that the DA is heading with towards 2024. A lot of it centers around this issue of cadre deployment. The DA wants to rid itself of this quote-unquote policy of the governing party and create a meritocracy-based approach towards key appointments in governance. Could you unpack that further for us?
So let me just say, I heard you saying quote-unquote policy, but it is a policy. In 1997, in Mafeking, the ANC went and they adopted cadre deployment, and that policy says the party must gain control over the army, the public service, the judiciary, the police, and that's exactly what happened in the decades after 1997. We are still living the consequences of that in places like Joburg and Tshwane. We're still trying to eradicate that. And so to build a capable state, one that can deliver on better services, that can ensure people that there is fairness in the system, destroy the system of insiders and outsiders, we have to eradicate gated employment. Defeating the ANC alone is not going to do it, because some other party can implement its own gated employment. So it's a core constitutional issue. We have to build a capable state, and that's why it's such an important mission for the DA.
And before we run out of time, Mr. Brink, we are dealing with constitutional amendments now. A large part of that deals with discipline and strengthening the party ahead of 2024. There's one of those amendments where you seek to erode ill discipline amongst party members. What informs this constitutional amendment?
So I can't speak for the constitutional amendment. It's not me who is the proposer. It's open to debate. I can talk about the principle of making sure that there is discipline in any political party. As I mentioned earlier, debate within a party is very important, and that's why we're having this debate. That's why we're having this elective Congress, to hash it out. But once a decision is made, any organization needs to cohere to that decision and go forward. And the folks who don't want to have the freedom then to make some other decision. But if we are to keep our promise to the voters, and this is especially important in coalition times, politics is already so fractured. If the key player in our politics doesn't have the ability to keep the promises to the voters, then you are in real trouble.
Have your branches not been performing adequately? We see that there is a move to improve their performance as well within these constitutional amendments.
I think it's one of the key pillars of John Steenhuisen's leadership when he was elected, to say branches must be at the center of decision making. And it's important then for members to be recruited in those branches, and for councillors to make sure that they don't gatekeep. Councillors must be out there recruiting new people. We can't have gatekeeping. We must grow the organization, and any successful political party will have branches at the center of that organization.
And lastly, tomorrow morning you'll be voting through the electronic platform, Open Vote. Who do you believe is best placed to lead the DA into 2024?
John Steenhuisen.
And your reasons?
He has changed this party. We were confused. We had a measure of an identity crisis. It is under his leadership that we had a policy conference, that we clarified many of the issues. We're not perfect. We are not growing rapidly as we would like to, but we've solidified ourselves, and we now form the basis of the majority in most of urban South Africa. And I think we can only build on that and continue making progress.
Thank you so much for your time. That was newly elected Tshwane Mayor, Mr. Cilliers Brink, just briefing us here at day one of the DA Congress at the Gallagher Convention Center. He's standing behind John Steenhuisen, saying that that is the man he believes can lead the DA into the 2024 elections.